So I'm going to be arguing the proposition, my plan, video games glorifying gun violence where the player is rewarded for killing other characters, where the main point of the game is to kill as many characters as you can via gun violence. These games need to be banned by the federal government for all those under 18 years old. Now, there's no secret that children are far more impressionable than adults. According to David Walsh, the National Institutes of Health show that a teenage brain is not even fully developed, particularly the prefrontal cortex, which is the area of the brain that controls impulses. So when this area of the brain is activated, we revert back to familiar patterns of behavior, or behavioral scripts is their term. The problem with video games is they're a very active experience. People are rewarded for their actions through points or achievements. This reinforces this behavior. If it's gun violence that these kids are practicing in the games, and that becomes reinforced, they internalize it, and that becomes a behavioral script in its own. Now, if we add this to the fact to new research, one article titled Media Violence and Social Neuroscience in Current Directions in Psychological Science, the journal, we find that recent evidence shows that exposure to violent video games is linked to a decrease in the activity of the brain structures that are needed for regulation of aggressive behavior, and a decrease in activity of structures needed to carry out, an increase in activity of structures needed to carry out aggressive plans. So this was done through research where they used an fMRI machine to analyze participants' brains as they were playing violent video games, and they found this link neurally in the brain of increased aggressive behavior and failure to control that aggression. So this shows the harmful effects that video games can have on our children, who are already very influential. The problem is when this spills over into the real world and this aggression becomes more than just bullying or fighting at school, which in itself is a problem, but it can lead to more tragic events. So in 2005, the case of Devin Thompson is cited in an article by CBS News titled "Can a Video Game Lead to Murder?" Devin Thompson found himself, he's a teenager, found himself in a police precinct. He shot 2 police officers, EMT worker. He stole a police car to get away, mimicking scenes out of his favorite game, Grand Theft Auto. And when he was caught, he told the police that life is like a video game, everybody's got to die sometimes. So we can see the influence that violent video games had on Devin Thompson's behavior. The other problem is that he was able to access these games at all. He bought 2 copies of Grand Theft Auto from 2 different stores when he was under 17. This shows that the industry is not self-regulating and needs federal intervention. The whole idea of a rating system is that the industry understands that games rated M for mature are not suitable for our youth, who are much more impressionable. So these violent video games are in the hands of our youth when the industry themselves knows that they should not be. Now, as there's plenty of other evidence, meta-analysis that show that video games cause aggression. These are studies of large studies that study a bunch of other smaller studies. One such study, Violent Video Game Effects and Aggression, Empathy, and Pro-Social Behavior. This was in Psychological Bulletin, and they studied 130 research reports on this same topic, violence and video games and aggression, and this included some 130,000 participants, and they found strong evidence that violent video games pose a significant risk factor for both long-term and short-term increase in aggressive behavior. Finally, as far as constitutionality goes, there's a precedent in 1968 case, Ginsburg versus New York State, where the court ruled that video game, sorry, I lost my place here, of course. Okay, so,
Fine.
alright, that's fine. Ah, so close to being good.
So 90 seconds of cross-examination.
Okay, what do I even ask in cross-examination?
I have no idea.
Can you tell me more about the New York State president, since you were gonna talk about that real quick?
Yeah.
Let
So,
me see if I did.
in it's on the other side of the paper. Okay, so 1968, Ginsburg versus State of New York. This formally criminalized the sale to children under 17 of material deemed by the state to be harmful to minors. Now, this was originally intended for pornography, but the term harmful to minors is very vague, and with all the reasons that I've just cited, video games are inherently harmful to minors, and this also shows that the court is not afraid to intervene in the lives of our youth. And so they did it in this case, and they should do it again with violent video games.
Right.
I apologize if I have to stop and cough during this. I'm really sick. Okay, so tell me when I'm supposed to start.
Whenever you're ready, I'll start a timer.
Okay. Hi, so I'm Eliza and I'll be arguing for the opposition. In the wake of recent mass shootings, such as the one at Newtown and Aurora, Colorado, a lot of people have been calling for the ban of video games that they see as glorifying violence and somehow causing violence. But to place a ban like this into effect is really going to ignore a lot of the complex factors behind violent crime and violent games. So according to a New York Times article published pretty recently, February 11th, a man named Dr. Michael Ward and his colleagues were researching the effects of this. Now, they studied the effects of video game sales in populations with a lot of young people, specifically college students. And in the summer, when they found that these games sell more, they actually found that the rate of violent crime went really, really low. Furthermore, government statistics tell us the sale of violent games has doubled since 1996, but violent youth crime has halved itself. It's gone down by half from 1994 to 2010. One reason for this is that games can provide an outlet for frustration. If you're really, really upset about something, you can go beat somebody up, or you can go play a violent game where you beat the crap out of somebody in a virtual world where no one actually gets hurt. So the more violent games sell, we found from these statistics and from common sense, the more these violent games sell, actually the less violent crime exists. So according to this guy, he says, quote, "I don't know that a psychological study can ever answer this question, the question being, of course, whether violent games cause violent crime." Another expert, Professor Brad Bushman of Ohio State University, recently conducted an experiment where players played Mortal Kombat, I think, over 3 days, and he tested the levels of aggression. Now, he said, "My study cannot be linked to mass shootings such as Newtown." He says in another Seattle Times article study, he said, "It's impossible to know whether playing these games cause such violent crimes because you can't give people guns after they play violent games." He said you can't do that, so there's no way to really link it to premeditated crimes like Newtown. Focusing on only video game violence really ignores the complex and multitudinous factors behind violent crimes, such as your personal background, your family life, and most importantly, your mental health. According to the American Psychiatric Association and Professor Paul Mullen, Doctor of Science, mass shooters, like the ones at Newtown, etc., are often, bullied loners. They have a lot of paranoid and obsessive tendencies. Another, Dr. Marissa Harrington, says these typical perpetrators were low-status males who had had some threat to their already pretty low status. And the cause of this violence, such as, Columbine, was this threat. It wasn't video games. So, according to the National Institute for Mental Health in 2008, about 11.5 million adults in the United States live with a serious mental illness. Not just any mental illness, but serious enough to be debilitating. Serious enough that you could hurt people, potentially. Excuse me. The prevalence of this serious mental illness is highest among young adults, i.e. the people who are most likely to be playing these new violent games, especially because, as he said, the games would be legal once you're 18. The group measured was from 18 to 25. Only 40% of these people received any kind of treatment, and less than half of these people in this age group, again 18 to 25, receive any treatment for depression, which is a really common sign between mass shooters and perpetrators of violent crimes. Excuse me. In an interview with New York Times columnist, a man named Dr. Craig Anderson says basically, if someone has no other risk factors, if someone is perfectly mentally healthy, they can play Grand Theft Auto all day, no problem, nothing bad is going to happen. But, if they're mentally ill, that's when these games start to really trigger something. So, I propose a counterplan, which would be a better understanding and treatment of mental health in the U.S. and restricted access to guns. For instance, an increase in public inpatient beds in mental health hospitals and better public awareness could really help people who are suffering from mental illness get the help they need and prevent them from perpetrating these violent crimes. In the U.S., there's a really huge stigma attached to having mental illness, and better public awareness of this will make it, more socially acceptable for people to come out and say, yes, I have a mental illness and I need help. Furthermore, all these violent crimes are perpetrated with guns, If we, for instance, make psychiatric evaluations necessary for ownership of semi-automatic weapons, you can keep these weapons out of the hands of people who are going to do bad things with them. My counterplan is mutually exclusive because the government, as we all know, has like $0 right now. There is definitely not enough money to do both his ban and mine because, you know, there's a current rating system right now. It takes a lot of money to enforce that. Then you have to prosecute the, you know, the businesses that don't follow through on that, assuming they're going to follow through. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort.
Time.
So yeah, that's my plan.
Alright. So 90 seconds of cross-X.
Okay,
Right.
I have just, I guess, one question really.
Right.
So you said yourself that our country is very low on funds to begin with, so how are you going to fund your mental health plan?
Currently, we're spending a lot on military budget, and it would be nice to cut some of that. But I was more referencing that there is not enough money to do both of our plans. If the government allocated, you know, X amount of dollars, say $1 million, for preventing violent crime, they can either spend it on your plan or on my plan. That was more what I was getting at. So I hope that clarified.
Okay. That's the only cross-examination.
Alright. Do you need prep time or are you ready?
Yeah. Just like a minute or two, please.
Excuse me. Also, I apologize if I coughed during your speech.
It's okay.
I'm not trying to distract you.